Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Wednesday midday, and we're going to take a look at Category 5 Hurricane Irma. Well, we will as soon as this thing loads. I'm sorry. It's one of those days today. The traffic on the National Hurricane Center websites and some of the other websites are quite heavy, so it's just taking a while for all this stuff to download. But you can now at least see most of the satellite loop with the eye. Let me see if I can get a wider picture in the meantime until the signal gets a little better. And there you have it. Here is Irma on the wide view so that you can see Jose to the southeast, which is almost a hurricane now. Top winds are 70 miles an hour. And we have Tropical Storm Katia in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico strengthening. Top winds there 45 miles an hour. And that could become a hurricane as well in the next day or two. But that's going to be pinned down in the southwestern Gulf. Jose, don't be surprised if this winds up being a player down the road. I'm not going to spend any time on it today because there's just too much going on with Irma. The eye of Irma passed over the island of Barbuda, St. Bartholomew, and over St. Martin and near Anguilla. I wish this is really ridiculous. Let me try, see if I can refresh. Unfortunately, I'm having a really difficult time with this. It's very slow to load. You know what? I'm going to try something else and then come back to it. So maybe once it loads, it'll be okay. So let's, you know what? Let me move over back to the tropical satellite, and then we'll come back to this. So the hurricane is going to move very close to or right over now the British Virgin Islands. It is just about there, and it continues to have maximum sustained winds on the newest advisory from the Hurricane Center. We are, I believe, carrying 185 miles an hour. The pressures come up a little bit at 918 millibars, but this is really just, again, it's amazing watching this move along as it moves toward the west-northwest. Now, when we look at the water vapor imagery, so we can take a look at the three systems, Jose here, Irma, and the Katia in the southwestern Gulf. Except for the upper low, if you look up on the upper corner of the screen, you can see the swirl there in the eastern Atlantic. Except for that upper low, that is really it. The conditions across the tropics are very, very juicy. We have a solidly moist atmosphere. There's a little bit of dry air that's to the northwest of Jose, but that's not going to really get in the way. And, of course, Irma sitting in its own little world. And if you look north and west of Irma, you can see where the dry air is. That's that upper high that's separating it from the trough that is sweeping into the east. And you see the clouds in the northern Gulf and across Florida and up the east coast are moving south-southwest to northeast. That trough extends pretty far to the south. So, you know, that is going to be the real key here in terms of the forecast for Florida, is whether enough of that trough is still left behind where it pulls it up a little bit more to the north at the last minute and keeps the center off the east coast of Florida. And not all models agree with that, by the way. There are those that take it further west. And one of the things I will point out here is the fact that all through this cycle that we have dealt with Irma, the adjustments with everything have been west, up until now anyway, have been west and south. It looked to me like Irma overnight when it was going through the islands took a bit of a jog more to the west. Hopefully the latest loop, we'll have it up there. Or at least I have a full shot here. So you can see here's the eye, still perfectly circular, by the way. And there we have the British Virgin Islands. This is from earlier, by the way. This is here. The British Virgin Islands are here. This is from earlier, so the whole loop hasn't really loaded yet. I'm having a real problem with this. We'll try to reload it. I really want to show you the tight loop. It's never been a problem up until now, but I guess we're going to have this issue with the images loading. Seems like everybody's trying to get onto that at the same time. So, you know what? Why don't we jump to the NAM model, because we have that out, and we'll put it up there for you. So we'll interact here and get the NAM up there. You'll see enough of the NAM so that we'll get an idea of what it's doing. Now, you got to remember at this point now, we're going to have models that are going to go further east and are going to go further west. And this is the latest NAM run, which we'll roll it back so when it comes into the screen. So this is tomorrow evening, where Irma is now moving through the southeastern Bahamas, and warnings are going to be going up for the Bahamas if they haven't already, and moves kind of starts to see toward the end of the period here, and we have it all out. You can see the motion is more toward the north at this point. So, you know, that is a consideration. This is at about 77. I'm going to just kind of square this would be a 25.6 north, 77.64 west, and we're getting motion here more toward the north. So the NAM wants to come a little further east. It's really important that we keep the core of that hurricane off the east coast of Florida. It's one thing to get grazed by the west side of the storm, but it's quite another to get into that core of that eye wall. And again, I want to caution that this is one model run that we're looking at. Now, what is happening aloft, and I'm going to go up to the higher levels of the atmosphere. I'm going to usually go at 500 millibars, which is 18,000 feet, but I'm going to go a little further here and go up at 250 millibars, which is up at about 25,000 feet plus. And if you look off the southeast coast of the United States, you see the wind arrows are blowing southwest to northeast. That's the bottom of this trough that extends from northern New England right down into western Virginia, western North Carolina. So in between that, there's a very narrow ridge that is over the top of Irma that's beginning to give way. And this is why we're starting to see this northward motion at this point. Now, at the same time, you have another trough with a system here up in southwestern Minnesota, eastern South Dakota, that is diving southward. That is going to be the one that the models in the longer range, which we can't go out beyond 84 hours on the NAM, take it after it's moving north, hook it back to the northwest. So this is why I keep thinking that the risk area is going to remain the Florida East Coast and the southeast coast of the United States. And I might want to even extend it a little bit into southwestern North Carolina at this point, based on what I looked at from the overnight runs and the runs from this morning. I'm going to take a look at the Recon. We have a new flight, so let's see if we got... Okay, so this is the old one. So just give me a second here, and I will put the new link in there so we can take a look at the Recon report. And here we go. Okay, so here's the latest flight going in. They're inside the eye wall. You can see the island, the Virgin Islands, are just to the west. We've got these wind barbs, 137 knots or greater, right along and inside the north side of the eye wall, and a smaller band on the southwest side of the eye wall. Don't have a pressure reading yet, but we'll check it back in a few minutes and see if we pick that up. Whoops, that wasn't exactly supposed to happen. So if you're in Danbury, Connecticut, you get to at least see your forecast. Let me go back to that satellite loop of Irma. I keep trying. Nope, still hasn't finished loading. I guess I just have to let it sit here and let it load all the way. I know it's a little bit frustrating to kind of watch this load up, but it's equally frustrating to me to have to wait for it. But everybody's in there at the same time, so what am I supposed to do? Do, 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 do. All right, I guess I'm going to just give up on this at this point. Here's the advisory from the Hurricane Center. So we now do have hurricane warnings up. There's a problem of waiting. It probably would have been easier to do it before the advisories came out or after it. We have hurricane warnings up still for the Northern Leewards, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, on through the North Shore of the Dominican Republic and the north coast of Haiti. We have hurricane warnings up now for the southeastern Bahamas, and you can see the official track of the Hurricane Center. They've shifted it a little bit to the right, taking it right over the coast of southeast Florida and then just offshore. And by the way, it should be noted that the model spread with the ensembles, you know what, that's what we can look at. Why don't we do that? We'll look at the ensembles from last night, because I know a few of you have asked me about that from time to time, and we'll take a look there. Let's see. Just letting you guys know, I'm doing the stream live right now. I'm not doing it on tape, so I'm not able to see the chat board while this is going, but I will come back to you. So just a second. So why don't we look at the ensembles? Just give me a moment here. I'm going to get these things to load. Okay, so and let me get you a nice close-up region of the southeast. Awesome. And now, of course, let's roll back. And again, you know, tropical tidbits, the traffic there has been so heavy that it's been very difficult to get in sometimes. So let's take a look here. All right, so there's Irma in the yellow. And at this point, we are now on 6Z on Sunday. Now, what the ensembles are, for those of you who don't know, there's the GFS operational run, and that's the run that you see, and that's the main run. But there are variations of that GFS, different parameters in some have different data in it. There's a whole different mix of them, and there's a dozen and a half different, we'll call them members. So when they run them, they each go different ways to some degree, and you try to kind of see where the bulk of them are to get an idea, because sometimes the operational could be completely different from the ensembles. And you can see on the GFS ensembles, it actually takes the track, the average track here is to the east of Florida. Although there are a cluster of members that take it over and into parts of the west coast of Florida, but most of them are off the southeast coast. Of the U.S., South Carolina, Georgia to coastal North Carolina. This was last night's 6Z run, just to be clear. So we'll see what the new GFS ensembles do a bit later on. So we kind of know at this point what we're dealing with in terms of the situational loft, and really the battle here from the standpoint of forecasting is going to be to try to figure out where this is all headed in the long run. I think I might have the latest hurricane models in here. Is that possible? Nope. Sorry. One more time for the Irmasat loop. Yep, still not doing it. Okay. Oh, is it possible that it's coming in a little faster? I really want to be able to see that eye go over those islands, but unfortunately, again, we only have a couple of frames in here, so it's still loading. But this is the look of Irma back several hours ago. This is from 07:45, so this is basically from a little bit before 4 o'clock this morning when the eye had passed over Barbuda and headed toward St Martin and Anguilla. So I think what I'll do at this point is, why don't we just come back to to me on this shot, and we can talk for a little bit with regards to what's happening. So Maggie Brown says, is there a good way to anticipate how strong Irma would be if it were to make landfall further north in Georgia, South Carolina? Maggie, I think based on what I'm seeing on the computer models, it could be every bit of a Category 4. I hesitate to go higher only because there isn't a history of Category 5 hurricanes. There have been a history of 4s off the southeast coast, and certainly a 5 is possible. But I want to see if Irma maintains the kind of strength that it has been that it's had here at this point. What happens as it moves further west-northwest? Does it clear Puerto Rico, which I think it will? Does it clear the Dominican Republic? I think it does. I don't think it's going to go into the north coast of Cuba. The question, I think, now begins to shift over whether to the east, whether we see a landfall in southeast and coastal Florida, or does it stay barely offshore Florida and move northeast toward the southeast coast of the United States? Matt Wilson, is it inherently more difficult to predict the 5 versus the 2, the Category 2? Very good question. It's different because the Category 5 hurricane is so vertical in terms of its structure. It goes so high up in the atmosphere that you have to look at the steering winds in the higher layers of the atmosphere rather than the lower. When you have a less developed hurricane or a tropical storm, it's not it doesn't go up vertically as high, at least not yet. It's maybe in the development stages and it eventually gets there, but it tends to move more in reaction to the steering winds at the bottom of the atmosphere. And I think that's one of the reasons why the European yesterday it kept taking it into Cuba, because it had Irma all wrong in terms of the strength. It had a pressure of 965 millibars for this morning, so it was only off by 50 millibars. Now the last European run from last night was very similar to the GFS, and I can show that to you. It finally seemed to adjust for the pressure issues that it had, and came around to the GFS's view to some degree. It was certainly a lot better than what it was, and the tracks of both those global models were pretty good. So this is, you can see even here on this one, you see the pressure is like 961 when it was approaching the islands, and we were at 915. So this is supposed to be for 8 o'clock tonight. It has a pressure of 949. We're at 918, so it's 30 millibars too high. The fact that it's a weaker system, still a formidable hurricane here with that kind of pressure, but the way the model is seeing it as a weaker system, it's going to try to track it a little bit more to the west because it's responding to the steering winds a little lower in the atmosphere. There will be, if we wind up with a Category 5 into the Bahamas, you have to ask yourself, the upper steering winds will tend to want to turn it more toward the north. This is last night's with the European, and you'll see it kept it offshore from Cuba. Just the base of the L barely touches the coast now instead of being inland. And then from here, this is Saturday night, it took it almost east of due north, just skimming the southeast coast of Florida. So that came in line with the GFS. And from this point, after that, it goes inland into South Carolina, just west of Charleston. So 2 landfall possibilities, I think. Well, we're certainly going to have this rake through the Bahamas. I think it stays north of the Dominican Republic, the east coast of Florida at risk, and the southeast coast of the United States, Georgia, South Carolina, and maybe even into southwestern North Carolina. Based on what we're seeing at the moment, please understand that it's fluid in terms of how we deal with these things. It's a fluid situation, and that's just the reality of meteorology. Access 2084, they're saying that this is the strongest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic. No, let me just clarify that. Irma, I believe, is in terms of wind, it's the second. It's tied for the second highest at 185 miles an hour. That's tied for the second highest, and I believe Hurricane Allen back in 1980 at one point they carried 190. And Gilbert and Irma are tied for second. From the standpoint of lowest pressure, it's not even close. Wilma was at 883. There are a number of hurricanes that fall in the range from the 915 I think we saw at the bottom with Irma so far, and the pressures that were 883 in Wilma, I think 888 in Gilbert, and 892 I believe in Allen. The Labor Day Key storm, Camille, they were all down there with lower pressures. So it really depends on which one, which measure you use. From the standpoint of wind, though, from what was measured, it puts it at a tie for number 2. Tony M, thank you. Yeah, good to see you here. You're good to be reading the chat log. You are going to heaven reminds me of OKX County OEM conference calls. Oh, that's very flattering. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm just trying to do my best here to give folks my opinions. And by the way, you need to consult with your local National Weather Service office, National Hurricane Center, also for more information about your local area, and consult your local government officials with regards to any questions that you have on what kind of action you need to take. I can't really answer questions regarding your localities and in terms of what you should or shouldn't be doing. That's a decision that you need to make, and you need to make it in conjunction with the people in your area that know about these things. Tony Larich, Southwest North Carolina. I think, I might want to edge that risk area up a little bit into southwestern North Carolina if we wind up seeing a turn more toward the north a bit sooner. All right. And that would shift it slightly more to the north. So we want to pay attention to that. Is New England completely out of the picture at this point, Thomas Pinola? I think in terms of a direct hit, yes, it doesn't set up, the way I'm seeing it, it doesn't set up for any issue regarding a direct hit for New England. The issue of whether the remnants get up there in one form or another, I think, is a different story, and we're going to have to visit that a little bit later on. It's a little bit too far into early next week. I want to see, got to figure out where the landfall is first. Then we have to figure out whether it is going to take a hook to the west and go to the west side of the Appalachians, because if it does that, then we won't really see very much at all in terms of rain. The other thing also to consider for those of you in the in the mountains of Tennessee, western North Carolina, northern Georgia, South Carolina, that if this winds up doing a track where it hooks and goes into the southeast coast and then hooks into the west side, into the Appalachians, it is going to be a heavy rain event for you. So you might want to have that in the back of your mind with regards to Irma. How accurate are the intensities on the ensembles? Well, the further out you go with the ensembles, they tend to average out what all the members do. So the pressure reflection is not really a good standard to use on the ensembles. You're better off just looking at the general trends in terms of the pressure field to try to get an idea of where the different models are and the spread from west to east. Rather than looking at the exact pressure. Let's see. James from North Belmore, practically a neighbor. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Cameron Cotter, we are scaring people for no reason. We should just wait until 48 hours until installed impact before we tell people where it will hit. You all scared millions from New York to Pensacola. I might have to ignore you. You know what, Cameron? I think you should. I'm going to block you. So I'll save you the trouble. Because before I do, if you're still on, let me just tell you something. First of all, 48 hours. All right, you expect no information to be given out at 48 until 48 hours. You know what would happen if that was the case, given the sizes of the populations and how long it would take to have those people move out? Okay, you would kill people. So what you're saying is stupid. The second thing is, and I'm getting my back up here, by the way, you need to learn to understand how to approach this. You're an adult, and most people are adults, and most people understand the fluidity of weather. And in lieu of what happened in Texas, in Southeast Texas, and by the way, the rains that were predicted for South Texas were pretty clear, more than 72 hours out. All right. So apparently the message didn't get through to some people. And I'm not talking about people that stayed back. I'm talking about maybe even some government officials who apparently decided that it's okay to throw weather people under the bus because they need to throw some of the blame somewhere. Okay. I kind of get the politics of it, but I'm giving meteorology on this page, on my Facebook pages, on my websites. I am not scaring people. I'm giving them information that they are adult enough to consume and make decisions their own way. And apparently you don't seem to understand this. So, it just really annoys me. People like you come on here, you're very condescending, and you sit there and you say, we're scaring people. We're also saving some, potentially saving some people's lives if there winds up being a landfall. And maybe there won't be a landfall. Maybe it'll stay offshore and we won't have a Category 5 hurricane come on the coast. Then you can come on and complain that we didn't get the death and destruction that you were hoping for. That is what your attitude is. That is what people like you sound like. And I have no patience. So you're gone. And I've just ended my rant. I hope everybody enjoyed that. Between the Category 6 stuff and this and stuff like that, it just gets me very, very annoyed. Thank you, those of you who, kind of sat through that. It's just so ridiculous. You don't want to be here, don't be here. If you don't like what's on this channel, go to some other channel, okay? If you don't want the information until you're inside 48 hours, then don't watch until 48 hours ahead of time. And when you're sitting on a road that's bumper to traffic for 100 miles or more, then, you got your wish. It's just annoying. Anyway. Sorry about that. I guess, yes, Bertha, you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I kind of enjoyed it too. I get very frustrated, and all us weather people here, we get very, very frustrated about all this because we're trying to do our job, and that's, giving out information, and that's, by the way, that's a lot different, than I'm not just putting up a map and showing you a point of landfall and saying, oh my God, it's going to this spot, you need to get out. I'm trying to actually undo what other people are doing when they do stuff like that, where they put up these maps that you look at and you see that it has a Category 5 hurricane sitting right over your city, and they give you no context. They give you no other information that's pertinent. I'm trying to take you through the whole process of the whole forecasting process here so that you can see what we're dealing with. And you see how everything changes almost hour by hour, especially now where we have the core of the hurricane that has moved over the Leeward Islands and now just about moving over the Virgin Islands. This is an hour by hour forecasting game from here on in. And it's not an easy thing to do. Since all this stuff is available on the internet, I challenge any of you, go ahead and try. Look at all the information that's out there and then try to kind of figure out where everything this is going to go, and then what is the practical forecast part. When you get into the short term, when you're dealing with ultra specifics and you're talking about a handful of miles, this is not an easy job. And meteorologists and weather forecasters in the private sector, on television and on the internet, that are responsible know this and take their jobs very seriously. So, I'm glad I got it all off my chest here. Thank you. Yes, Tornado, it's about getting informed and not about scaring people. I met a woman yesterday, Thomas, in Murphy, North Carolina, who was driving to Miami that evening. Well, I had somebody come on here last night that was considering going down to Florida to do some storm chasing. I told him, don't ask me what I think you should do. I could only tell you what I would do, and that is I would not go. All right, Joyce Mack in New Jersey. Anyone directly in a zone of warning that is... Look, the risk to New Jersey, in a zone of warning that is balking about preparing needs a slap. I'm sorry, let me read this from again. I'm in New Jersey, already planning for what potentially can come our way out of all of this, but anyone directly in a zone of warning that is balking about preparing needs a slap. Yes, correct. Thank you, Joyce. And again, for New Jersey, the Northeast, I think the risk of a direct hit is very low based on what I'm looking at the moment. Okay, but it's good that you're getting some things in order, because if it's not now, it might be another time. So, that you're doing the right things. It is, that's the thing. If you're prepping and the bad thing doesn't happen, you should be happy. Okay, not upset. Okay, it's a pain in the neck to do some of this stuff. It's a pain in the neck to put up storm shutters. It's a pain to make sure your gas tanks are full in your car. I get that. I have to do the same thing that everybody else does. Okay. But, in the event that something doesn't happen, I'd rather do that than have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars doing repairs on my home, dealing with damage and downed trees, power lines, electrical outages. And, of course, if it's a really serious hurricane hit, you start to, where people's lives are at risk, and I'd rather deal with the quote disappointment of not getting the hurricane as opposed to, and there is no disappointment, by the way. After what I went through with Sandy, that was one of the only times that I worked every single storm imaginable, snowstorm, hurricane, and so on. I sat at Sandy. I was not comfortable with leaving my home, and I stayed home for that. And I got to tell you, we had 60 to 80 mile an hour winds here where I am, and I'm 9 miles inland. But we had 60 to 80 mile an hour winds for hours and hours. Okay, and I heard trees coming down all around me. Thankfully, nothing near my house, but just nearby, blocks away. When I went out the next morning, trees crashed through car windows. I saw trees crashed in cars in ways I couldn't imagine how it happened. I remember seeing a car where the tree was actually through the driver's side and the passenger side window, but I was thinking that the only way it could have gotten there was that if the tree fell basically came sideways. And it was no small tree either. It was a real large oak. I don't know how it got like that. It will be a mystery that I will carry for the rest of my life, not knowing. But again, you should be happy when you don't get the tragedy you were looking for. Okay, so here's the plan of attack for today. I will live stream tonight around midnight. I don't know if I will have time to do a live stream this evening. If I do, it'll be between 7:30 and 8:30, but I will live stream around midnight. I hope I say it right. Please forgive me if I don't. Etienne Kingsley, as a meteorologist, do you ever find yourself rooting for a storm that is close to breaking records or getting stronger? Well, look, just like with respect to Irma, I've been doing this for 40 years. So, when you're a kid and when you're early on in your career, when you first start, the excitement of storms and forecasting is very overwhelming. It's very overwhelming. It's your passion. But I learned very quickly that the objectivity of what I'm doing is the most important thing. And that's what I had to work on. And I did it by, thankfully, my first job was 1,800 miles away from where I lived, was in Corpus Christi, Texas. And it was totally a different world for me in terms of forecasting. I had never lived in the South, so I really wasn't familiar with, the meteorology and the climate I mean, I was familiar with the climate to some degree, but, it's a lot different when you live someplace. And I very quickly learned how to be objective because I was able to actually forecast objectively for where I lived, being 1,800 miles away, than I was doing when I was actually living at home. So when I came back here 5 years later into the New York, New Jersey area, that objectivity training in my head was there. So I don't really root. I learned early on how to observe. I don't really stand around and root for this sort of stuff, like cheerleading, like in a football game, from that respect. But I do look at these things with a certain amount of awe. Idia Diaz, as I've said, New Jersey is at. I don't think there is a risk for a direct hit. The highest risk is the southeast coast of the United States and down to the east coast of Florida, in my opinion. Intercoastal waterway waves projected 24 to 35 feet. Well, if it's a Category 5 approaching the coast, it can certainly be every bit of waves of 2 feet or higher, and the impact to the coast is going to be somewhat substantial. Although if it stays offshore, you're going to have a north wind. Now, I would direct that question to someone who knows the marine area there better than I do. So it's hard for me to really give you a good answer to that. A hurricane that came up in the Catskills. So I assume it's probably the remnants of a hurricane that came up there. There have been several over the years, Fred, if you happen to remember the year, because there have been a number of them that have produced some very heavy rainfalls in inland areas, Agnes, David, among others. So, but I'm sure that's certainly possible. I mean, certainly those kinds of things happen. The only thing is, I'm not, again, with respect to Irma, it would be a track has to go up east of the Appalachians for something significant to happen from the standpoint of rain and some wind for the Northeast. I'm 200 feet from inlet water, and this is our season for Jersey flooding storms. We plan for it. Right, especially because we have a full moon right now, so tides are already running abnormally high, and we're going to see an onshore flow establish over the next few days. Again, with the track the way it is, the Jersey impact here is not something that we need to really worry about at this point. All right, folks, I'm going to stop it right here. So I hope you had a good time hanging around, and sorry that I couldn't get that Irma satellite loop to work, because you know what's going to happen. As soon as I shut the stream down and check it technically, it'll work perfectly fine. So again, I'll see what happens this evening as far as a live stream is concerned, but I certainly will be coming back with a live stream either figure it around 12:15. So 15 minutes after midnight, I think that's probably when I'll get it started. All right, hang in there. Have a great day. Please be safe in your travels wherever you go. And if you're in the Southeast and in Florida, make sure you keep in touch with the latest advisories from the National Hurricane Center and your local National Weather Service forecast office.